Coming up on this episode of What's Your Story?
I would say Ronald Reagan, I would say Margaret Thatcher, and I would say Pope John Paul II. I would say those three folks were statesmen.
Wow, that's an interesting statement.
Oh, yeah.
So, Jesan, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. So, have I got your name pronounced right? I'm not too sure.
It's actually Jesan Sorrells.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. I know that names are very, very, very important. So thank you, Jesan, for taking the time to talk to me today. Okay, great. So you are the CEO of a company called HSCT Publishing, and you're based in Texas. So now I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that and why you got started and what led you down this road.
So thank you, Laraba, for having me today, and thank you for talking with me today. So as you said before, my name is Jesan Sorrells. I am the CEO of HSCT Publishing. We're a publishing company that's wrapped around a leadership consultancy. As a result of COVID-19, we transitioned from being an in-person training and development company to a remote training and development company that really focuses on helping small and medium-sized business leaders, specifically managers and supervisors, become better, right? Because in times of COVID, in times of disruption, in times of great crisis, one of the more deleterious areas, one of the more damaging areas for folks can be in workplaces around leadership. As a matter of fact, our motto here at HSCT Publishing is no more accidental leadership. And we do this through the delivery of training and development ideas and concepts through two products, our Leadership Toolbox, which is in essence a masterclass with coaching, certifications, and assessments. And of course, our leadership development asynchronous subscriber-based platform, LeadingKeys.
Now, I have to say, this is very, very interesting. You know, you used a term that I've been thinking about called no more accidental leadership. Now, I just want us to focus a little bit more on that statement because, you know, it makes a lot of sense because a lot of leaders who are inexperienced, who don't have that much under their belt, are thrust into a leadership position, whether they like it or not. So this can lead to problems further down the line. So let's look at that term and let's explore that. What is it that you mean about no more accidental leadership? And can you explain the process, Jesan?
Sure. So on average in America, and I don't know how it is where you're at, but on average in America, a manager or supervisor is thrust or promoted into their position, and then it is 10 years before they take any type of formalized leadership development training. Just think about that for a minute. 10 years before they're actually formally trained. Most managers and supervisors come into their roles as a result of attrition, as a result of being engaged in a survivor type exercise where they were the last person standing. And so congratulations, you have the title of leader. Mm-hmm. Titles are not leadership, and people don't follow positions. People follow leaders. Mm-hmm. And so fundamentally what managers and supervisors have to learn, and they learn this through the School of Hard Knocks primarily over the course of a decade, is they learn what works with folks and what doesn't work with folks. They learn how to be reactive, not necessarily responsive. They learn how to be accidental, not intentional. And over the course of the last 9 years that we've been doing this, we've trained close to 15,000 managers and supervisors, and we've seen the consequences and outcomes of accidental leadership. Failure to retain teams, high levels of dysfunction and damaging communication, high levels of fake and unnecessary and damaging and toxic conflict, which can lead to, of course, workplace bullying, workplace discrimination, diversity and inclusion issues, sexual harassment issues, toxic workplaces. Need I go on? And of course, which this is at the lowest possible level, apathy and a failure to understand that the fact that you are in a position means that you are the example that other people have of leadership. They don't care about a prime minister and they don't care about a president. They don't even care about their mayor. They don't even know who that person is. But you, they know you. And the line between a leader and a boss, that's the line that it takes 10 years of managers and supervisors going through the accidents of leadership to discover where that line is. So our focus here at HSCT Publishing is to reduce that time frame of learning. It is to provide managers and supervisors with the skills necessary to lead so that they can be intentional leaders. Fundamentally, we believe that every problem in the world today, and by the way, here's another loaded statement for you, every problem in the world today can be solved through the effective application of intentional leadership practices. And we firmly stand behind that.
Well, I have to say that's a very impressive statement that you've made. If you think about leadership, more often than not, leadership is not something that people, as mentioned, are prepared for, and it's almost like a Hunger Games or a Squid Game situation where, more often than not, the leader has had to go through substantial trauma to come out of the other end, and then now they are quote unquote the winner. They are at the top, they're at the zenith of the organization. So obviously you are trying to go the other way, and you don't want people to go down that line. And now, having said so, many people can be leaders. Many people, have the capability to be leaders. So who are you trying to reach out to? What's the process? So let's delve deep into that and talk about it more.
We live in the world of the real. We don't live in the world of the Hunger Games, and we don't live in the world of Squid Game. Unfortunately, we live on Earth, and we live on the Earth now, and we don't live on the Earth that we would like to live in. We live on the Earth as it is. I've said this for many, many years. I'm an organic trainer who lives in the real world. Look, quite frankly, sometimes in our training process, we will have a client, we will have an attendee who will ask us, hey, son, I've got this bloodsucker of a boss who takes all of the credit and gives us all the blame, and has created a toxic environment with poor communication and high levels of conflict. What do I do about this? Let me give you the reality. The reality here is you won't mutiny. You'll sit and complain, and then you'll continue to try to advance and get promoted inside of a toxic culture, hoping against hope that once you get to the top of that culture, you'll somehow make changes. And it might take you 10 years. It might take you 20 years. But by that point, you'll have an ulcer. If you're a woman, you'll have 3 husbands. If you're a man, you'll have 3 wives. And you'll have a boat that you go and hang out on the weekend, and you'll wonder who you are, and your kids won't know you. That's one option. The other option is you could sit in this training, and you can listen to what I'm about to tell you about a mutiny. You could gather the people together who are tired of engaging in this toxic environment. You could put together a plan and a vision for the future that is better, and then you could go and basically upend your boss. Now, the reason why people don't do this is because it takes courage, it takes clarity, and it takes candor. We have a process we call the 3 C's when we talk about conflict. Most people lack clarity in their thinking. Matter of fact, when we run trainings, one of the questions that we will sometimes ask is, how many people here believe that they think clearly? Tragically, only around 1 person or 2 people out of 10 will raise their hand. Think about that for a minute. Most people are running around with muddled thinking. And by the way, they're running around with muddled thinking not about highfalutin things or, big ideas like around leadership, right? They're running around with muddled thinking around, well, where do I get my next snack, or when's the next coffee break coming up? Muddled thinking kills more bad leadership than anything else. And it kills more good leadership than anything else. And it encourages more bad leadership. It even encourages something that's worse than bad leadership. It encourages what I call mediocre leadership. Mediocre leadership is neither hot nor cold. It merely just is. It's lukewarm, right? And no one wants to take a shower in lukewarm water. That's annoying. So you asked about process, right? How do you process someone through that? So let me go back to the mutiny question. Step number 1, get clarity on a future. Step number 2, get some candor about who you are, where you are at, and how you are attempting to lead. And then step number 3, you're going to want to get together some of your courage, some of your heart. Brene Brown calls courage a heart word, and she's exactly correct. Courage is looking in the face of the potential of you being fired, of you being demoted, of everybody hating you, and saying what a leader does, what a statesperson, man or woman does, is look in the face of all of that and say, well, there's a better way. So let's go. Those are your 3 basic steps. But if you can't even start on step 1 of clear thinking about how you're going to get out of your problem, you cannot get to describing what your problem is, nor can you get to the courage to fix it. And many times, folks complain like it's a bodily function, rather than solving the problem that their own 2 hands and their own effort inside of their own workplace culture can actually solve. Look, fundamentally, every single person is a leader, whether they are defined as being at the entry level, at the mid-level, or at the top. But we don't run our organizations and our cultures like that. We run them like hierarchies, and then we demand that people, well, have accountability thrust upon them. And we weep when they do not take ownership, and we wonder why there's all this responsibility laying around, but no one wants to pick it up.
Great stuff. This is good. But I'm going to ask a more pressing question, Jesan. Many people are doing what you're doing, or doing something similar to what you're doing. So I always ask people, what is it that makes you unique? Because, if there's no uniqueness to what you're doing, then there's no real point, So can we talk a little bit more about what makes you stand out from what somebody else is doing, who may be in the same field as you?
That's a great question, and it is a fundamental one. And let me frame my uniqueness, or let me frame the uniqueness of our consultancy in this. The uniqueness is my voice. And that's all that's necessary. No one else is Jesan Sorrells. That's it. Jesan Sorrells was born in 1979. Jesan Sorrells is 43 years old. Jesan Sorrells is this. Jesan Sorrells is that. On the long enough tail, with 8 billion people on the planet, every single one of us is a unique and shining star. I don't need any other differentiator other than that. There's no other differentiator necessary. And as a matter of fact, because that differentiator is so unique, the voice of Jesan Sorrells comes out in our content. It comes out in our training approach. It comes out in our training philosophy. It comes out in our training products and our services. It comes out in our platforms and in our podcast. It comes out in our books. And it rings through everything. So even when I give my training content, or even when we give our training content to the other trainers with which we work, or they're the facilitators with whom we work, the voice of Jesan is so strong that it comes through in that content. And that voice can never be replicated. By the way, if you're looking for something that you cannot get off of Google, the word you're looking for is a forgotten one. It's called wisdom. And wisdom is something that is in incredibly short supply today. Now, I've used big words today. I've used 2 big words, actually, which I think you need to focus on when you're thinking about leadership development and when you're thinking about not only what I do, but also how that relates to how you live your life and how you work in your business and doing those other areas. I've used 2 big words today. I've used truth, capital T, truth, and I've used wisdom, capital W, wisdom. Both of which, by the way, in our current era, people are incredibly shy about talking about, because we live in a relativistic, deconstructed, French deconstructed, you'll appreciate that as someone from the UK, French deconstructed world. We live in the triumph of Nietzschean nihilism. That wily old German that lives in the sub-basement of your assumptions because you're part of the West the same way that I am. He lives all the way down deep in there, unexamined and just curling and coiling around like a snake. And so one of the major problems that we suffer from, particularly in the West, and now I'm going to use another big term there, the West. One of the big problems that we suffer from is no one fundamentally in a lot of different areas is really going down into the sub-basement and really battling nihilism. Really saying that, no, there's actually something that's worth fighting for. There's actually something that's worth leading from. There's actually something that's worth preserving here. When you've deconstructed the deconstructing, and when the Ouroboros eats its own tail, what else are you left with? And so I'm not going to say that I reject that. What I'm going to say is that we still wrestle with those nihilistic existential constructs inside of our own work, and we seek to rout them out and replace them with truth and wisdom. which is the most valuable thing that a leader, most valuable gift that a leader has to get today. Whether they want the gift or not is a different thing altogether, but it is the most valuable gift that a leader can have today.
Well, I have to say, to me, maybe not to the people listening, it's obvious to me that you have a religious inclination. Am I right? Am I wrong? Feel free to explore this question more.
Sure. So I'm happy to say that I'm a follower of the Christian religion. I not only read my Bible and pray every day, but it also influences what I do and how I think. Yes, and I try to live to the standard that has been set, the biblical standard that has been set. And we can argue about what that standard is and all of that. But fundamentally, the thing is, I actually believe that there's a standard to be lived to. So I try to hold myself to those rules and hold my leadership to those rules. Fundamentally, here's an idea for you. As a person who operates in this space, I would never tell you to do something that I have not done myself. So I've led people that are atheistic. I've led people that are gay. I've led people that are straight. I've led people that identify as transgender. I've led people and trained people that identify as black or white or Cuban or immigrants or whatever you want to call them, right? We live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and increasingly, for lack of a better term, paganistic society, which means that you're going to lead all of those types of people. I have led atheists and I've led believers. And quite frankly, fundamentally, whether they believe they have a soul or not, I believe that you have a soul. And so, because I believe that, I'm going to lead you from my standard and live up to the standards that I am required to live up to and hold myself to that, regardless of what standard you're holding me to. That's almost an irrelevancy. Now, because there's going to be nuance inside of this, let me address the religious question. When we talk about religion, religion is merely a structure built around a set of transcendental ideas. And when we deny those transcendental ideas or we deny the power of them, the transcendental impulse doesn't go away. It goes and it migrates to someplace else. So even your most atheistic or agnostic of listeners have a transcendental impulse somewhere. It may be a transcendental impulse in biology. It may be a transcendental impulse in sociology. It may be a transcendental impulse in nature. It may be a transcendental impulse in their own existential nihilistic dread. But everybody, as Bob Dylan said back in the day, everybody worships somebody. Everybody bends the knee to something because, again, to go back to Nietzsche, human beings cannot create their own value structure out of themselves. We tried for 120 years and we're failing miserably at it. And we seem to not really recognize that we can't do it. And so we are increasingly frustrated and in despair because it's not working. And we seek to replace those things. We seek to replace those transcendental structures with other structures, and they don't satisfy. Your phone will never be as satisfactory as a relationship with a higher power. And if your phone is your higher power, well, then you're constantly going to be frustrated by whatever's happening on Facebook right now or Twitter.
Well, I have to say that is a very, very powerful statement. You know, even if I'm not necessarily religiously inclined, I have to say that, that, you can take certain principles in terms of leadership from religion, the good aspects, and utilize it. So, yeah, there's no problem in that statement. Now, I have to ask, what is it that you want? We're drawing to the end of the program, but what would you want people to know after having had this conversation with myself? What is it that you want people to take away from this conversation?
So first off, thank you, Laraba, for having me on your show today. Thank you for talking with me. Thank you for asking me these challenging questions. This is great. Normally, I don't get asked questions like this, so this is good. I like going down these roads and exploring these ideas. I would want everybody to go and check out, obviously, our leadership toolbox at leadershiptoolbox.us and, of course, at leadingkeys.com. You can follow me everywhere. I have my own podcast, Leadership Lessons from the Great Books, where we read a great book. Our very first episode focused around the book of Nehemiah, where a gentleman builds a wall in the face of a toxic work environment and make some decisions about who's in and who's out. Yeah. A Book of Nehemiah is a great book on leadership, is a great main book to really look at in the biblical literature around leadership roles and responsibilities. So you asked me to conclude, what would I say to a small group of people to wrap up? And here's what I would say. I'm going to repeat something that I said yesterday at a conference. I'm going to repeat it here for you all today. We are in truly revolutionary times, and the revolution is not being led by the people from the top. The wizards of smart at 10 Downing Street or in Brussels, they don't actually know what's going on. They think they do, but they have no clue. They have appointed themselves into positions and into titles, but that doesn't mean that they're leading. The last true statesman we probably had was probably about 30 years ago, right along with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And whether you agree with their politics or not, you knew that they were leaders. I would say Ronald Reagan, I would say Margaret Thatcher, and I would say Pope John Paul II. I would say those three folks were statesmen.
Wow, that's an interesting statement.
Oh yeah. As a Brit, I know exactly what I just said there. Yes, that's correct. Oh yeah. I just loaded it up and threw it at you.
Wow, I didn't think we were going to talk about Margaret Thatcher in this conversation. I actually quite like it. I like, being challenged myself. I mean, I come from a completely different perspective when it comes to Margaret Thatcher and leadership. But, it's, people have different views and different opinions. So, I mean, I suppose that's the thing, I'm very, very intrigued, even if I, as I say, have a different perspective from you. So let's talk a little bit more about that. The concept of leadership. I know we're supposed to have concluded, but now I mean, that statement has definitely intrigued me. So tell us, what is your position? What is your truth?
I think that statesmen, by their very nature, are polarizing. But not all polarizing people are statespeople. So we have to have some nuance in our thinking. Just because a person is polarizing doesn't mean that they are capable of leading. But just because a leader polarizes doesn't mean that they are not a leader. And the room of 15 people that I am talking to, none of those people know anybody at 10 Downing Street. None of those people know anybody in Brussels. None of those people got into that room with me because of who their daddy was or who their mommy was. Those people got there, and they are the most, and this is actually their strength, they are the most innocuous people who were chosen to exist in a time like this, to lead in the most innocuous ways possible, and to do it in small ways consistently over the course of time. Because what is happening right now, and what happens always in revolutionary and disruptive times, is it is not the people with the title and the class and the position that are the most important people, that are the most important leaders. It's the guy down the street from you. It's the guy in the trade union. It's the guy in your community and in your neighborhood. It's the woman who's your boss. It's the woman who is at the school. It's the woman who's in her family. It's the man who's at the church, whatever that may mean. It's the man who is on a podcast. It's the woman who writes the blog and puts the YouTube videos together. This is what our revolutionary times have brought us. It has brought us the ability of every single person on the long tail to be able to lead with courage and clarity and candor if you choose. Innocuous, small people made for revolutionary times like this. So every single one of the people who is in this room and within the sound of my voice right now needs to stand up, take on the mantle of leadership, and just lead. Start small, be intentional, and execute. Don't sit on your hands anymore. Because one day, your children are going to look at you, and they are going to say, what did you do in revolutionary times? How did you use your voice? Or did you just hang out and mow your lawn and maybe have a cuppa ever so often?
I don't know about you, but I think that's a really good way to conclude this conversation. Well, Jesan, it's really been a good conversation. It's really inspired me. It's really challenged me as an individual. I always like to take something from these conversations. So I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to me. It's been pleasurable. So thank you so much.